Hello and welcome to the Gnostic Warrior radio show and podcast, broadcasting from GnosticWarrior.com in San Diego, California, to around the world. I'm your host Mo, and today on the show we have Michael Arevna. Michael is the webmaster at RevelationNow.net, where he talks about the hidden occult that's happening in the media right before our very eyes. In this podcast, Michael gives us some hidden insights of these rituals that are happening on live TV in front of millions of people around the world. But before we get into this great interview, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
For a great mobile website by expert web designers, visit WeCreateWebDesigns.com. Get your website now for only $79 at WeCreateWebDesigns.com.
Now it's time for the Gnostic Warrior radio show and podcast. How you doing today, Michael?
I'm good. I've been busy at home. My three sons are on spring break, so they're 7, 9, and 11. So I'm pretty busy, sweaty, dirty, and tired.
Yeah, and you're in New York here in the States, right?
Yeah, I'm about 40 minutes outside of New York City in upstate New York.
And how's the weather there today?
It's actually just wet. I mean, it didn't snow, which I'm happy for. I mean, the snow was like 6 feet high in front of the mailbox. The mail lady, she came to the front door and told us we had to, clear a path. But I had recently dislocated my right shoulder where my pinky finger's numb, and I can't really get out there and do that stuff. So I'm just struggling through the winter.
Wow, how'd you do that?
Well, I have like a condition called hypermobility, and I was just throwing a football sidearm like Bernie Kosar style, and it popped out.
I'm laughing. I was just picturing that in my head when you said that,
And it just popped out for a second, and then it immediately popped back in, and it was horrible. It's almost like a bad sprain. It's almost synonymous with that.
I've had that happen to me, so I know how it feels. And again, I was laughing at the remark you made there. And, let's educate the audience a little bit, Michael, on your background. You're doing a lot of work, of course, on YouTube, your YouTube channel, and then your blog, RevelationNow.net. And you have, I think over 11,000 followers on Facebook, doing a lot of conspiracy stuff, symbolism, stuff that's happening out in the media and sporting events. I want to talk about that. But before we get into that, can you educate us briefly, on who you are?
Well, I grew up a military brat, so I had the opportunity of moving around the U.S. and in some different countries, and I think that caused me to have to read a lot because it was very hard to keep long-term relationships. So I became like an avid reader very young. I mean, I was reading John Steinbeck when I was like in 4th grade and things like that, and Alvin Toffler's Power Shift when I was in like 7th grade. And so anyway, I started reading a lot, and then I got to the Bible, and I read the book of Revelation, and I was just so entranced with the symbolism, trying to figure everything out. And then my mother challenged me by telling me I'd never be able to figure it out. So I think that was what really pushed me. And I just started reading about ancient civilizations as I got older, and I spent a good probably 2 years of my life where I was living with some party promoters when I was in college, and I just had to work one weekend a month, and we were down south, so the money we made I could just stay home, and I was reading like a book a day, literally like reading a book a day. And I remember bringing all the books out into the living room, and I read maybe 129 books in a year. And then wow. I kept doing that probably over the years, and then I would take like a 6-month break because you'd get burnt out, and maybe there was something good on HBO, a series to watch or something. So
you were doing some power sessions, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day reading?
Right. I wasn't doing anything else, and I think what really got it was the Sumerian civilization and the correlation between that and the Book of Enoch. And from there, I just worked my way back from the most ancient civilizations. I mean, I've read the Emerald tablets of Thoth and things of that nature. But I tried to mirror against biblical knowledge, and then with what civilizations that we have records on, and try to understand the rituals and the occult and spiritualism and religion from that standpoint. So I kind of built my foundation there. I'm at a point now where I can just sit down in front of the computer and just pound out a story in maybe an hour or maybe 2 hours, depending on graphics and video.
What started you on the path of correlating, the biblical type stuff such as Revelation with current media? Did you always see that, or you saw it right away? You saw a connection?
Well, I really owe it to my wife for bringing me back into the Bible, because at a certain point, I kind of got away from it, and I was really on the UFO side of the fence, where I'd followed, the work of Zecharia Sitchin, and I was looking at the fact that there were so many paintings and petroglyphs and caves of aliens and things of that nature, and I kind of began to discount the Bible. But the more I began to understand that the elite are actually performing occult rituals, they're honoring somebody in the spirit world that's not the creator, and it's a very dark magic and a dark energy that they're doing. And by proving that, I was like, well, if they're doing that, there must be a creator that they're fighting against. So I kind of just walked the fence on the UFO side for a little bit, but now I'm positive that there's a spiritual war going on, because people are doing spiritual rituals, occult rituals that you can trace back to ancient Egypt.
And what do you tie this to as far as what occult rituals in ancient Egypt? Would this be ISIS and the priesthood, such as?
Oh, yeah. When you see that, most definitely. And like, if you can go back to Mendez, and you could look at even how Michael Jackson turned out. He's very similar to a Korybont dancer, and they looked like Michael Jackson, and they would like dance for I don't want to assault her name. I think it's Sybil, but you begin to see what was ancient in the present too. So once you trace it back and you see the correlation, you begin to understand that these are ancient things happening in the present. They never died.
And what do you believe is the purpose of these rituals, such, and these mass seen sporting events and the media seen by millions and millions of people?
Well, I've touched on quantum physics a lot in my research. I've had to actually go there. One of my favorite books is The Spiritual Universe by Dr. Fred Alan Wolf, and he was basically going back to the time of Aristotle and Plato and those free thinkers of that time. And he was making a correlation between spiritualism and quantum physics and where we're at today. What they're doing in these Super Bowl rituals is a manipulation of energy. And what I later began to understand was about these ancient gates. There was only two gates that the ancients would revere, and we've heard them throughout like Christianity when they say the pearly gates, St. Peter and the pearly gates, but that was the silver gate, which is the exit out of heaven, and then the golden gate, which is the entrance into heaven. So what I'm seeing them doing is they're actually performing these rituals under certain constellations, and I actually saw like a pattern happening with these massacres as well, from the Batman massacre. Either one of those gates would be over it. The Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing. So I kind of was just doing some pattern matching at that point, and I was saying to myself, out of 88 constellations, how is it possible that the two that represent the celestial beings comings and goings would always be present at these massacres and at the Super Bowls as well? So what I actually learned a couple days ago, I put up a story, is that the same colors that were, I believe, that were used in a color alchemy in Super Bowl 48, where they had the 10 blue colors of the Seahawks and then the red orange, or the orange of the Denver Broncos, was carried over to the 2014 All-Star game, where the East wore the same colors as the Seahawks, which represented Jupiter, has a relationship with Jupiter, and then the West wore red, which has a relationship with Mars. Mars is known as the orange-red planet or the red-orange planet.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know Mars, of course, is considered the planet of war. And then we have Jupiter, which is the king of planets. And there's connections with Jupiter with Jove and Zeus, the god Zeus as well. So do you think that this ties to Revelations and we're coming to that end point, that epochs in our living where our society has degraded so much? You know, you see these rituals with, you know, these things that are going on in our society and all the violence and the mayhem and, you know, the wars all around the world. Do you see it going towards and culminating to an end right before our very eyes, and we're going to witness it, you know, or we are witnessing it?
Yeah, I think we're in the throes of it right now. How it's going to end up and when it's going to end up is going to remain to be seen. But there's a lot of prophecy that's happened. It's very debatable. I've had debates with people over the years, and I prefer not to. But there's things in the Bible like prophetic books that talk about things like Egypt will still be known as Egypt, and that was a very powerful statement to make 1,000 years ago because many countries have changed their name over the time. Like for instance, Turkey used to be known as Lydia, and I thought that was pretty relevant. And then Revelation 16:12 said the Euphrates River is going to dry up and make way for the kings of the east to march over to Israel when war jumps off over there. And in July of 2009, like that was all over the wire. I think Bloomberg ran it. I knew the New York Times ran a story on it where they said, are we living in the days of Revelation because the Euphrates River is drying up? It dried up to a point where you could actually walk from one side of the river to the other. And then a big problem with snake infestation jumped off as well because the snakes didn't have anywhere to go. So they started going to the villages where the people were. And I don't think that a lot of people heard about that story. It wasn't, although it was on the wire, I think that was one of the weekends that like Paris Hilton got out of a limo with no underwear on or something, and that took over the airwaves. But that was like, you know, another major sign from a biblical perspective. And we're seeing that now. You're seeing the moral decay of society, and especially I'm seeing this with the same-sex agenda because I've noticed that the same-sex agenda tries to compare themselves to the Black Americans, the African Americans. But the African Americans, if you look at what they went through, they were emancipated in, I think, 1863. And then it took them almost another 100 years to get civil rights. And the same-sex agenda is now like it's going to be on Burger King cups pretty soon. And it's just it's on something else. It seems like there's a campaign that's going against that. And I started a 3-minute prophecy news on revelationnow.net, and I ran across a story yesterday that I actually spoke on where Putin is actually repudiating the United States for falling away from Christian values. And I just find that ironic that, you know, the Cold War enemy of the U.S. is now the global cheerleader for Christianity and holding the U.S. accountable for their non-Christian values anymore. So I think that we are in it, but there's so much that has to happen now. I mean, there has to be a great earthquake. There has to be, you know, a horrible tribulation period for those people that have to participate in it. And then there has to be the Great War. And then there has to be the return of these Christ versus the Antichrist. So it's an exciting time to be alive, I think. It's almost as good as Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's surreal at times, and I agree. There's, you know, this is all playing out, you know, right before our very eyes. And who is behind these rituals that we see on TV and in the media? Is there an organization? Have you traced it to any one order or anything?
Well, I found the director's name. I can't remember the name right now because to me, with a name, everybody's replaceable, like a battery and a flashlight. But it's the same person that actually coordinated all the entertainment from the Madonna Super Bowl to Beyonce to the Bruno Mars. So it's the same person. And what I found is like that when you start tracing these people, I mean, it's very difficult for us to do because we have to rely on the internet and we don't have access to to like FBI database and intel like that. And I bet if we had that, we could find out everything definitively. But they're normally mixed up in some type of group that could be traced back to either a Freemason agenda, which gets pulled into it, or there'll be a corporation that could get linked to the Rothschilds somehow. And I think everybody is pretty well versed in who they are because there's hundreds of books out on it now. And I know that because when I started reading when I was in my early 20s, there weren't that many books out for the New World Order. I think I might have read maybe the third or fourth one by Ralph Epperson on the New World Order when it just came out. And I stopped reading the New World Order books because after a while they all started sounding the same. They would just end their sentences differently, and it was the same intel that was going on. So it all goes back to like the spiritual war, because when you start getting into occult rituals and you start finding out it's the same type of behavior that was repudiated from a spiritual perspective in the Bible, then you have to understand that there are some spiritual things going on. And if you study near-death experience, you'd understand that something does happen. And I think one of the most compelling stories was by Dr. Eben Alexander, who had a New York Times bestseller called Proof of Heaven. And he's a neurosurgeon, and he had meningitis of the brain, and he was like brain dead for, I want to say, a week. And he went to the other side, and he came back, and he told everyone it was real. And then he checked his charts for his brain activity, and that part of the brain that should have been on for dreaming and hallucinations and everything, it was turned off. So the unseen world is not a manifestation of the brain.
And what is the purpose of these mass rituals? I know you had mentioned, quantum physics. Is the government possibly behind or complicit in this? I mean, to me, it sounds plausible because, how could these mass things go on and them not see it and say, hey, we don't want that, or they allowed and it's okay?
Well, I have a theory, and I think that, and this is so funny to me when I hear people saying there's no conspiracy, there's no secret society, there's no Freemason agenda, there's no Illuminati, but I think that we actually lost the country when John F. Kennedy was killed, because I'm sure that you've heard his freedom speech, and he said the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we as a people are inherently against secret societies, secret oaths, and secret proceedings. And then he went on to talk about an agenda or a conspiracy to enslave every man, woman, and child in America. And so I think he said it, and you saw what happened to him. So I think after that, everybody else has been in line, and people want to give President Obama a hard time, but it doesn't matter who is going to be in that office, because they're going to have to follow the agenda or they won't be there. And it's as simple as that. They would impeach him or get him murdered or just make them totally ineffective. I mean, the remainder of Bill Clinton's presidency was him fighting, that stupid sex stuff with the intern. It was stupid. Yeah. When you look at how much was spent on the investigation versus how much was spent on 9/11 investigations, I mean, it's laughable.
What's the latest ritual that you've seen in the media, or anything you want to comment on?
Well, I had run some stories on RevelationNow.net where, since this was my third Super Bowl that I was announcing from I'm looking for the occult mechanics. I mean, a lot of people are looking at the Super Bowl and they're reading the Bible and they're saying very basic generic stuff like, Satan was the choir angel in heaven. And we understand that. I mean, I think everybody is on the same page, but there's a question about why and how it's all working, and that's what I've really been trying to figure out. So what I did was 3 weeks before the Super Bowl, I ran a story on what exactly was going to happen in the Super Bowl in terms of the halftime show and what we could expect. And I was spot on about a lot of things. I even went as far as saying that I expected to see like lightning bolts in the sky or some type of arcing lights in the sky, and they ended up using fireworks. And I had no idea that they were going to use fireworks. It was just something that I was envisioning that they're going to do. But what caught my eye is what I do is I look at the I looked at the alignment over the Super Bowl, and they've designed all of these stadiums to be on ley lines and under a specific alignment. Like they make sure that the halftime show is going to jump off like I think between 8 and 8:30 or something like that. But there's a certain alignment. The Silver Gate has been over these Super Bowls, so this time instead of just looking at the alignment, I actually looked at the planetary positions, and I knew from the Beyonce Super Bowl that Jupiter was in Taurus, and I said my prediction for Beyonce was that because Taurus was in Jupiter, she's evoking that, and Taurus is a very important. It is the god to the occult folks in the ancient times. Apis the bull worship. When Moses came down off the mountain, the people put a golden bull together, and it's all this bull. It's all this bull. And so that was my prediction for Beyonce. Like 3 weeks or maybe 2 weeks before the show, I said, I bet you're going to see a lot of bull symbolism in her performance. And mind you, she has no songs about a bull. There's no song called All the Single Bulls, Bull Survivor. There's no bull theme in a song, but yet she laid down in a bullseye. There was Taurus symbols made out of fire and light in the show. And they actually ignited a bull at the beginning of the show. And this time they did it so fast that if you blinked, you missed it. And I had to actually go back later on, like the next day, and step through the performance so I could find all the symbols. But it's very important to evoke the symbol, because I've discovered through Kabbalah research that each symbol has a counterpart in the realm of spirit. That if you call on that symbol, there's an entity associated with that symbol. And I think that we've just been dummied down in our education system. I mean, I think this is something that the ancient people knew. Like if the ancient people saw Madonna coming, they would probably run. They would probably just grab up their kids and jump on a donkey and just like, let's get out of here. A witch is coming, because they could tell, and they knew what she was going to bring with them. But with Bruno Mars, I was able to just look at some of the signs, and I said, well, everybody's chosen for a reason. I think that there's certain words that have to be said during the ritual as well, and there's certain archetypes that have to be channeled through the people too. And I was talking to a friend of mine that used to be in the occult, and he told me that everything I was saying was absolutely correct, plus the fact that they bring in spiritual entities for the occult ritual. Somebody there is hosting an entity from another world, and a lot of people saw that when Beyonce performed. They could see manifestations in her eyes and a bulging throat and lines that were in her mouth as well. Kind of looked like licorice coming down the side of her mouth, like Twizzler color lines that just popped up in her mouth, and it was just very strange. And then later on, I discovered that people thought that blackout was just something that was because of technology, a switcher box problem or something. But I found out that Jimi Hendrix got the same effect when he performed in his Rainbow Bridge concert in Hawaii. And what he did, they admitted he was into the occult, and he was doing an acoustic alchemy experiment where he grouped people together by astrological signs. He had all the Tauruses sit together, all the Cancers, all the Libras, all the Scorpios, Sagittariuses, all that. And he would play certain bars, like 3 bars for each house. And then he mixed them all up, and then it caused like people to start getting really emotional and crying. And then this was very key. Witnesses say that they saw UFOs like in the town next to where he was performing, said they saw UFOs flying around in the town, and then the power went out in the town.
Wow. And when did this happen?
This was Jimi Hendrix Rainbow Bridge concert. I've got I've got a prediction section on my site, and I actually have the video.
That's interesting.
Of the people, but I actually have I actually put two Super Bowl videos together where I actually took the people, the witnesses, and I just kind of condensed everything, because if you go look at the Jimi Hendrix video, it's like an hour video, and you gotta go like maybe 43 minutes or 48 minutes into it to find the right testimony. But those people are there, and I think that proves, I mean, it can't be a coincidence that the power went out for Jimi Hendrix when he was performing an occult ritual, and then the power went out for for Beyonce. So, and I also said something in my article that I bet that because Bruno Mars is doing this, he's going to be highly rewarded. And I think yesterday or just a couple days ago in the Britain's Grammys, it's called the Brits 2014, he got International Artist of the Year. So he's going to be rewarded for everything that he does because that's what they do. He's going to get his thank yous.
And what's the symbolism of the bull mean?
Well, that's what I started to figure out, and I think that it has to do with I think there's when you get to a Gnostic expression of as it is above, so it is below. I think in the Bible, Jesus is quoted as saying something very similar to that when he says in Matthew 18:18, he says, "Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." So he's basically saying, as it is above, so it is below. And I think what they're doing is a spell where they have to evoke that symbol. And what we're talking about are very subtle energies here that they're working with, but they're able to harness it. And I think what they're doing is they're ensuring that their plans are going to work. And that's what I think that Super Bowl 48 was really about, was they're ensuring that their plans are going to work. Now, when I was looking at the alignments over the Super Bowl this year, I told you I looked at Jupiter, and when Beyonce performed, Jupiter was in Taurus, but this year Jupiter was in Gemini, and I'm sure you know about Janus as well, Janus and Jupiter. And then I noticed that Mars was in Virgo, and a lot of this stuff I don't even study anymore. It just comes to me, and I validated it later. But I said, I bet Virgo is like a birthing constellation. I bet that Christ was born in Virgo, and a lot of people I think of importance were probably born in Virgo. And then I found out when I did some research maybe a couple of weeks ago that it's considered a seeding constellation. And I noticed Mars was right next to the wheat in the hand of Virgo. And I said, I bet this has something to do with either the people in the Bible that are called wheat, or it has to do with a harvest of some sort. So I think that Mars, war is going to harvest peace, and I think this had to do with the Middle East, bringing peace to the Middle East, and that I think the biblical prophecy is going to have to be fulfilled. So I think that what they want to do is they want to use the threat of war or war to bring peace to the Middle East, because that's what the energies of Mars are used for. Mars is actually, people think it's just war, but Mars is there to bring peace through war. And I think this is why they used the Super Bowl to feature the armed forces. This Super Bowl was kind of wild to me. I was like, why are they featuring the armed forces? And there were so many overtures to the armed forces. And then I saw a connection there with the armed forces, because that same morning I kind of got thrown a little bit, because I had a prediction 2 days before the Super Bowl where I wrote that that the Denver Broncos weren't going to win. I got a lot of hate mail for that, before the game. They're like, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're a butthole, and a lot of it was horrible language that people wrote me.
Yeah, everybody loves their teams out there, definitely.
Yeah, I have nothing against Peyton Manning. I'm a Peyton Manning fan. He's a nice guy, and he's a class act, and he's going to go down in history as one of the greats. But unfortunately, he was wearing the sacrificial colors that needed to be sacrificed. So that the spirit world is higher than our world. So
what colors were those again?
Orange and red. And I believe that the horse, there was the horse had to be sacrificed to Mars. It was a symbolic sacrifice, basically. And this is what threw me off. If you go to my site, you can read the prediction there. I did that 2 days before, and people told me I was crazy, and you could read the threads. And I'm like, I'm just trying to figure this out. But that same morning, everybody knows that Philip Seymour Hoffman died, and so I was like, I bet he had something to do with it. And then I looked up his name, and Philip means friend of the horse, and I was like, that can't be a coincidence. And then I looked up Seymour, and I found a Teutonic meaning that means mighty at sea. So now you have horse and mighty at sea, and you have the Seahawks. So I'm sure everybody can see the correlation there. And then something really jumped out at me. During the investigation, the police found bags of heroin that were marked with the ace of spades and the ace of hearts. And like I said before, I have a military background. And so I know what the ace of spades is all about, the 101st Airborne Division. I was like, this is not a coincidence, especially when I saw the Super Bowl, and if you look at some of those people that were saying hello to their families during the Super Bowl, they right behind them was the 101st Airborne Division's logo, and on it is the Ace of Spades and the Ace of Hearts. And remember, they have to evoke these symbols. As it is above, so it is below. And I believe that there's certain entities, war entities, that are associated with these symbols that they were actually evoking. So they used, people think that they're just showing us stuff. They're not just showing us stuff. They need our energy. It almost is a correlation to the walls of Jericho. You know, when the people used their own sonic energy to knock the walls of Jericho down, where they marched around it 7 times. They could not talk. They practiced some principles that we don't know. We've just been dummied down so much that we really don't know much anymore anyway. But that's really what I saw. I'm just seeing these symbols, and I'm following the symbols, and I know, and I'm 99% sure that America is the witch or the sorcerer that is discussed in the book of Isaiah chapter 47. And I always think that would be the best rap music song if somebody put a beat to that and would just rap that, because it's the Lord telling the world what he's going to do. And he was like, I can see you and I know what you're doing. Try your many spells, your magic, your sorcery. And then we find these connections between the U.S., occult, witchcraft, sorcery, and we're doing it in front of 111 million people on TV, and they wonder why the Middle East calls us the Great Satan.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned Virgo being a birthing constellation, and then Jupiter being in Taurus, and during these events, are they hoping to have entities incarnate here on Earth through human beings, and these are future leaders or future people they want ruling, or are these spirits that we can't see? What's your theory there?
Well, I think when you read, like in the Bible, in the book of John, John tells you that you can't see them and you have to judge them by their fruit afterwards. So that's something that we've run into. But after reading the Emerald Tablet of Thoth number 8, I was blown away when I read that, because that predates the Bible by thousands upon thousands of years. But he actually spoke about it during his time when he had to banish serpent-headed men. And he said that during his time, men would conjure them up through a dark magic using blood and bring them up from underground. He said they were under the ground and they were from another vibration. And so to me, that's very close to what the Bible has discussed before, because there was an underground terrain called Tartarus that's according to the Greek lexicon, Tartarus, that Jesus went to when he was crucified, and he spent 3 days there in another vibration, mind you, because he wasn't alive and he was in another vibration, and he had to go under the ground. So I started to make all these correlations, and I'm sure that there's some truth to that, basically, that there is another species or entities that are of another vibration that live under the earth, and they're part of this too. When you get into the book of Genesis, I think it's 3:15, it talks about the serpent in the garden, and it talks about the seed of the serpent a lot in the Bible as well. So a lot of people want to argue about, did the serpent have sex with Eve, and is that how it started? But why, if the serpent is a timeless being, why does he just have to have sex with Eve? Why can't he have sex with Eve's cousin or Eve's cousin's best girlfriend or something like that? Why are they arguing about that? I mean, we're talking about genetics, and we're talking about a timeless being that's had time to live, plot, and plan during the rise and fall of like every civilization that we have knowledge of today.
And what's the ultimate goal of this plan, of all this magic, besides invoking? Do you believe these? Let me rephrase that question. I'll get to that in a second. I'll ask this question: are these demons and angels? Is this bad demons and good angels? What's your theory there?
Well, when you read Ephesians 6:12, it talks about there are dark forces in heavenly places, and that's what led me to look for the gate systems. I was like, why would it say that? Why would they say dark forces in heavenly places? This war is not about flesh and blood, it said, and it's about dark forces in heavenly places. So I started doing research on that, and that's how I discovered the golden and the silver gate. And I think there is something timeless that's going on. I mean, they've been fighting for a while, I think, and I think that I don't think that time is linear. I don't think that time runs in a straight line, or there would never be an ending. Because when you read about, the Most High, it says that He's the beginning and the end, and I think that time is circular. And I think what's happening right now is we're going near the end of it. We're definitely near the end of the time loop right now, and I think that this is about energy, and I think this is about controlling energy. And it's almost like when the music stops, whoever has the most energy wins. And I think that that's what they're trying to do. But there's an energy that's based on it's driven from a human perspective by moral energy, and you'll I think the byproduct will be a certain energy just based on your morals. I mean, if we were a society that just raped, pillaged, and killed, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Eventually, you gain so many enemies, over time, one day you get conquered and you get raped, pillaged. So God is a God of love and a God of peace and God of harmony. And so I think this is what this is really a battle about in the end. And it's about control, and it's about destruction. And you see who's winning it right now, because it's not that hard to fix the world. I mean, you sound like a reasonable guy. I'm a reasonable guy. Let me run America for 8 years, and I'll give you the next superpower, or vice versa. And I bet we could fix a lot of problems very quickly if they didn't kill us.
This is the year 2014. Do you believe that this is some type of planetary game that's maybe possibly a game or a war of races? It's interesting, they call us races in the English language. Is it some type of game that we're in, and just this is this phase of it, and we're coming to the end of it, and there will be a new one once all the pieces and the dominoes fall, and what's left is standing, and the goal is, of course, complete control of the planet. What is your thoughts there?
Well, I'm not really sure. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I can't definitively say, yes or no, but I try to look at things from the spiritual universe perspective. And if the rest of the universe is in a state of evolving to a higher frequency, we're going to have to become synchronized with that. And I don't know if the wicked are going to make it. I mean, I'm very curious about a connection between Malachi 4 and the Day of the Lord and all these chemtrails that are going on right now, because from my understanding, chemtrails are based of barium and aluminum, and barium is used to absorb radiation. And people think this has to do with Project Bluebeam and everything, and quite possibly it does, but I doubt that it does. I think this is more about the radiation of the sun and absorbing the radiation of the sun. And I think that through the work of Dr. Emoto in Japan, that he has shown us that our thoughts can change the molecular structure of water. He showed us that by speaking love, gratitude, and certain words, and then flash freezing the distilled water, certain like snowflake crystalline patterns would appear in the water, versus saying I hate you or you disgust me. Then you would see like a globby type pattern in the water. And I think that it's getting closer to what people are saying, that we live in a mental universe and it's a holographic universe. And I think that's where the real understanding is power. And power is going to be when we understand that we are actually creating this whole situation with our thoughts.
But don't we have the choice, Michael? You had mentioned earlier, if family 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, or whatever, would see Madonna, they would, run with their family. Don't we have that choice now not to turn on that Super Bowl or watch any of this stuff? Maybe carve out our own corner in the world without that. That's maybe filled with light. Do they give us that choice?
Well, we all have a choice. I mean, we have a choice, but, there was 111 million people that don't agree with that watched the Super Bowl. I mean, I'm guilty of watching it, for research purposes, but that's a tough one. I mean, the Satan, according to Corinthians 4:4 in the Bible, Satan, the serpent. I mean, all this, the Satan and the serpent race. I think that's all under the same umbrella. They are the gods of this world, and I think that it would be very tough for you or me if somebody teleported into your kitchen one day and said, "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to make you a billionaire, and this is what you have to do." And it's, I would never want to be in entertainment. I would not want to be in Will Smith or Puffy or P. Diddy, whatever his name is this year. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes, because they're going to tempt you with so much. and they're going to be like, this is your yacht, this is your helicopter, this is, your third home, this is your mansion with 21 rooms, these are your lovers. They bait you with so much. So we have a choice, but how do you make a choice when you're being, targeted by filthy rich people that's wealth is over 1,000 years old? It's very hard. I mean, that's somebody could have me going through a sex change with $100 million, and I said, I don't even know how I got here. I mean, look what's going on with Bruce Jenner. he's got long hair and he just shaved his Adam's apple. And I'm like, why are you doing this?
I choose, of course, not to watch any of that stuff. I don't watch the Super Bowl. I actually will watch the videos that all you guys do that are great. That's how I first had found you, and then I went to your website, revelationnow.net, where you put out a lot of cool stuff. Yeah, it's interesting times that we're in. Is there any good to this? I know you see these rituals where they seem really sexual connotations, and it seems kind of filthy. I wouldn't want my children or my daughter, watching Miley Cyrus or any of these girls, Madonna, doing these things on TV, So is there any good to what's going on? Is there any good going to happen out of this, or is it all going to be a bad ending?
Well, that's my favorite line from The Phantom Menace, that movie, The Phantom Menace, the Star Wars franchise, when Anakin was saying, I shouldn't learn how to save people because aren't the Sith evil? And Emperor Palpatine says, he laughed and he goes, Anakin, he goes, good and evil is a matter of perspective. So I think to the victor, the spoils go to, and they get to say, what's good and what's evil. So from our perspective, I mean, we can just hold on to what we feel is right. And, like you said, you're not really subjecting your family to the Super Bowl or to Miley Cyrus. I mean, you're protecting them because you sense something's not healthy about it. And I think at the end of the day, all this stuff that I'm studying, it can't be my whole focus. And it's very tough because I do writings on this, but I also have to do writings on what we need to do to elevate ourselves and become closer to the frequency of the universe, of the creator of the universe. And the more we're finding out about the Lord, we're finding out about the energy of love and the energy of forgiveness and the energy, the releasing conflict from our lives. And I think that's the first step for all of us. We have to take that charge of judgment out of us, and we have to be associated with no conflict. I've actually been getting ostracized by a lot now these days because I don't believe that you can have a political platform mixed in with the teachings of Christ, because he wasn't political at all. And I challenge people to actually show me any scripture where he participated in any type of political activism or stood up against the Roman Empire, which was running the world during his time. You're not going to see any of that, because that's not what he was teaching. I mean, he was teaching pure spiritual things and it's pure spiritual knowledge. And that's what we have to focus on. If you're trying to say, I'm going to splash the blood of Christ on this political issue and that political issue, there's Christians in Nigeria that have their own political issue. There's Christians in America that have their own political issue, and God's behind their issue, but God's not behind this issue. None of that is real. None of that is we should be following. I mean, if you're following the teachings of Christ, which I'm merely a student of the Bible. That's what I'm not really affiliated with any churches or any denomination, but I do read the Bible daily. I do study it, and I do try to apply it to my life. And the first step for me is to remove conflict from my life. And then I have to just retrain myself. We've been trained, we're carrying so many genetic issues that we picked up from our ancestors and our family. And then we have issues from just growing up in our parents' home. And some of the things that they did were great, and some of the things that they did were not so great. And we have to be able to shed them and hold on to what the teachings and that Christ was trying to show us. And I don't think there's enough emphasis on his teachings, because he was about love. I mean, even when in the Middle East, when a woman was caught butt naked in the act of sexual intercourse, Mary Magdalene, the Pharisees tried to jam him up and say, what should we do about her? And he was like, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. And basically he was like, I don't want to kill her. And then she looked at him after everybody left, and he said, just go away and sin no more. He's like, I'm trying to eat a bowl of hummus. Go ahead, you do your thing. Just don't sin anymore. And it should be like that. And I think that's what we have to get to. I mean, we shouldn't be, when it comes to the homosexual agenda, I'm not behind it, but I don't hate homosexuals, but I know that it's not natural. I know it's not a natural energy exchange. And I don't think it was the creator's intent to have one man deposit the elixir of life into another man's waste evacuation system. There's just nothing natural about it, and that's it. And I don't hate him for it. I've had homosexual friends in my life. Since I moved, I'm like just with my family, but I can be friends with anyone. I don't have to agree with you, but I can still be your friend and love you.
Yeah, and what do you think is the purpose of this homosexual agenda?
It's about imbalance. I think I finally had an epiphany. I actually wrote a story about that when I was talking about the Super Bowl. No, actually it was the All-Star game, and my friend is a bodyguard in the NBA and does that type of stuff. So he was actually at the NBA All-Star game in New Orleans, and he told me that there was an artist named Janelle Monáe who really is very vocal about same sex and same sex lovers and things like that. And this whole thing, it finally hit me. It's about the Satanic Kingdom wants us all to be imbalanced. If there is, and I don't know how it's all going to play out, but if there is a day of judgment and everybody that's been chasing and supporting the same sex agenda, they might be in trouble as well. Like misery loves company. And so what I think is that I just heard your
Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think I heard your blower. But what I think it's just really about imbalance, and I think that when you look at the energy of being a homosexual, it's almost like running a battery. If you run a battery and you pull up the hood of your car, you have to have a positive charge and a negative charge to make a current. And I think that what you're really doing with the homosexual agenda is you're making a improper energy. I don't even know how to describe the energy. I just don't think it's like if we could look at things like Neo did in The Matrix, where he saw zeros and ones. If you looked at homosexuals together, you would just see zeros and zeros. It's not even real binary code.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you'd mentioned Putin and Russia earlier, and I know they recently had instituted a ban on any kind of what they called gay propaganda there, where you cannot advertise anything of a gay agenda anywhere in Russian society. And here it's, of course, the exact opposite. Do you consider them Gog and Magog? That's going to come down, and that's going to be the big war, the final shebang.
That I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard different interpretations where George W. Bush, that was his name when he was being initiated into the Skull and Bones, and I'm not just sure who is going to be the character there, how that's going to play out. All I know is that all eyes should be on the Middle East now. I think that we're at the time now for everything to coalesce over in the Middle East into the final assault. It has to happen over there. And I think that, according to the Sitchin research, those holy sites were chosen for different reasons. But one of them was that they were flat enough to take the ships that came down or the entities that came down. And I'm just not sure. I mean, how can we really be sure? I mean, we're still relying on trying to understand an ancient civilization through a man that translated, an ancient civilization. And the Sumerian civilization was very close to the Assyrian civilization. So how can you really be sure? You know what I mean? That's why I try to just look at the prophecy and see how the prophecy is going to play out. So Gog and Magog are called out, in the book of Revelation, and that's supposed to be how it plays out. So we just have to see who the players are. It's all going to become clear as it begins to progressively mature.
You had mentioned energies, and I see you're writing about alchemy. Do you feel that they're playing some type of magic on us, the people, where something happens to our own energies, alchemy-wise?
Well, I think that they're absolutely. I mean, I just learned about the alchemy aspect. Like, I'm learning as I go with the occult because I'm not like an occult student. And what I found was in Super Bowl 47 with Beyonce. At the end of her performance, she walked to the edge of the stage and she told everybody in the crowd as she's breathing heavily, and she's like, "No, hold up your hands. I want to feel your energy." And that should have told people a lot right there. And she goes, wiggle your fingers. And so that tells you something right there. That they know something that we don't. For her to say that, I want you to hold up your hands and I want to feel your energy. And there was a hijack going on. And I think that if we could see into the right spectrum, if we had the right glasses on to see, we could have seen it. I mean, I think that they do have machines. I'm sure you've seen machines where they've taken pictures of people's auras before and they go, "Oh, yours is purple, you're such a beautiful person, yours is brown, you're probably sick." But they have that technology. But I'm saying that was something that's real, and she asked for the energy for a reason. I mean, how many times have you been to a concert and they go, "Thank you, good night, hold up your hands before you leave so I can feel your energy"?
I've never seen that, no.
Me either. So I just thought that was all part of the ritual. And the question is, where does the energy go? And I think that's why there's a demon involved. Now, what I found out about Beyonce is she goes by this alter ego named Sasha Fierce. And I was shocked when one of my readers sent me an email and they go, "Hey, Michael, were you aware that Sasha Fierce is an actual occult expert, and they wrote this book called The Book of Shadows, and it's a free book you can download of a book of spells." And it's so amazing to me that you can go download books of the occult for free, but you have to purchase all these self-help spiritual books and Christian plans. It's $29 or buy this, but the devil's like, "Here, take it for free." It's all. Do you have an internet connection? Well, it's yours.
Would you say that it's dangerous for people that aren't in control, possibly completely, to download these and read these, that they might be taken over, possibly?
Well, I read this book. I can't remember the name of it. I can email the book later to you, but it's about this this journalist, archaeologist, and he went and he lived with the shaman in I think it was either Brazil or Peru. But what he did is he took their sacred brew called ayahuasca, and he got to go to the other side. And he said it was amazing experience where he was transported to a whole nother universe. And a lot of these archetypes that we see embodied in stone in ancient Egypt with the bird head, jackal headed beings. He saw all those, and they were huge, 30 feet tall compared to him. And he also, which was really interesting to me, was that he experienced these serpent beings again. We're back to the serpent, and he said they were like giants, and they had these little pterodactyl wings, and they told him that that they created us, and told him the story about how they were being chased in the universe, and it's always a bunch of lies, because they say they created us, but who created them? Who was chasing you? It's always half truths and stories like that. But during his conversation with them, he said he began to feel a sinister intention from them. And he said he thought they were going to steal his soul. And I guess he had a safe word, to the shaman. He was like, "Blue albatross," and they knew to take him out. So they gave him a brew that would actually weaken the effect. So he said after that it was a pretty calm experience. But yeah, you're dealing with forces. When you go over to the spiritual side, you don't know exactly what you're dealing with. And I've heard horror stories from the Kabbalah, people that have practiced it and done rituals where they were actually killed, or they were mentally insane after doing that. And that's why you got these, you've seen that with with LSD and stuff like that. After a while, you're just never the same, and you don't know what attaches itself to you when you come back. And you have these disembodied spirits are they're very sexual. I mean, they want to feel everything. They want to be drunk. They want sex. I mean, everything is very material to them. So you never see a being take over a person and start a healthcare clinic, or, start an ashram or something. It's always we found him, OD'd in a whorehouse or something. And he was an occultist. So you're seeing that it's very dangerous stuff. I had a buddy of mine trying to get me to go on a ayahuasca trip in Peru for like $3,000. You pay $3,000, you fly over there, you go on a special diet for like 10 days so you don't throw up your guts when you drink the ayahuasca. They have like a cave with like comfortable bedding. It's all black. They beat a drum, and he's like, "Let's take the ayahuasca." And I was like, I'm too scared. They know who I am on the other side. I'll probably never come back the same, or the Liberace will come back in my body or something. I'll never be the same. So I'm smart enough to know I'm not trained enough to go do that.
Gotcha. You're comfortable, reporting on it, talking about it, the revelations on revelationsnow.net, and then your videos. And also, of course, you're offering solutions to people, as you had mentioned, love and the gospel and so forth. So you're comfortable doing that, but not going into that world. Do you read any of those books?
Funny thing was, though, I had found on the new $100 bill, I've got a digital blue USB microscope on my desk. So one day I ran a story on the new $100 bill. It was another bill that you could fold up and you could see like a natural disaster or a disaster happening. We've seen that before with the Pentagon, World Trade Center. So this time I flipped over the bill and I put the new $100 bill under my microscope at 60 times magnification. And when I looked into the windows, I saw Hebrew symbols and I saw Kabbalah symbols and I saw Phoenician symbols, and I was like blown away. So I took pictures of it, ran a story on it, and I had actually bought occult books. The bookstore in my village, I think it was a Barnes & Noble, was going out of business. And so I actually bought like some occult books for like $5. They were still shrink wrapped, and I never opened them. And I had them in my library, but when I got to the story, I didn't know much about it. So I went in my library and I couldn't believe that I had these books. I was like, I can't believe that I even bought these, because I never really intended to read them. I was being, I guess, a person that enjoyed a good deal. And they're big books. I mean, they're like 12 inches thick and everything. So when I opened up the books, I saw the symbols and I found out what was in the windows is called magic squares. And this is actually a talisman that we're carrying around. It has a symbol for Jupiter on the $100 bill. It has a symbol for Saturn. It has a symbol for Mars. And they have some other Kabbalah characters that you could put together. And I think that they're used to put a mark on us, or maybe a mark just on the U.S., but it can't be good because it was done in secret, and they're not telling us that they're doing it. And there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, but yet we have Kabbalah. It's not just Kabbalah symbols. It's like Phoenician. It's all from the ancient time, but it's definitely in the windows of the new $100 bill.
And is there a connection between all this with the Georgia Guidestones and the Denver airport? And is the Freemasons involved at all?
I mean, after looking at their history and understanding, how the Illuminati, infiltrated it, and people think that that's, BS. I was reading a report on Gawker, which I think is controlled opposition site, and they were basically saying there's no Illuminati and it's BS. But George Washington, I can't remember the guy's name. He was an English guy named John, maybe Robeson, and he actually wrote George Washington a letter about the Illuminati and his concerns. He was like, "Have they infiltrated your lodge yet?" And George was like, "I've heard of them, and I hope they don't." Basically, yeah, but I mean, that's not too long ago if you think about it, and they were alive and kicking then. And the Gawker report guys tried to say that they weren't even really alive. And a really good book to read is The Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman, and he broke down everything. He broke down all the relationships from the top down, and he had like a pull-out sheet with the hierarchy of everything and how everything works. And it is all spiritual stuff. So there's lots of players involved here. I mean, it's almost like terrorist cells that are working together in concert.
And what's the end game? What do you see happening? Do you see this war? What's your prediction?
Well, I think I'm not really sure. I mean, when you start looking at some of the acts in the Bible, you'll read about those three guys that were thrown into a furnace by Nebuchadnezzar because they wouldn't bow down to his false god, and they actually survived that. And there's the Jews that were in, the desert for 40 years. I really don't think it was 40 years. I think that's a spiritual application. I think that we have great powers inside of us, and that's why it's important to keep us dummied down and to poison us through the water by putting estrogen in the water and bisphenol A in the plastics and keeping us full of estrogen and poison and keeping our brains and our immune systems fighting this on a daily. But I think that we have great gifts that we're not able to unlock. So I don't want to go off the deep end and say, go buy 120 tons of freeze-dried food and make sure you have water, because the ancients that followed the teachings of the spiritual path didn't have to worry about these things. They could run out into the desert and they would be provided for. They could live, and they could be in the worst situation, the heat of a furnace that burned the men that were carrying them there. They still survived. So I don't want to be gloom and doom, because I think that there's something better, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. I think that what they're doing, though, when I say the people that are controlling everything, they're trying to get control and gain control for greater control of the people. And like you mentioned, the Georgia Guidestones, that's going to include reducing the population. But even before, and it's funny that it's the Georgia Guidestones, because President Carter had a Global 2000 report during his time in the office where it actually called for nearly the same amount of the culling of useless eaters, basically. And that was in a report under his administration, and he's from Georgia. You just made me think of that, by the way. But yeah, I mean, this is something they're trying to do, but just because they're trying to do it, it's like a bully being after you in school. Just because the bully wants to fight you doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to fight back against the bully.
And what are some solutions you want to offer the Gnostic Warrior audience, Michael?
Well, I would say right now, I think as soon as you recognize, what's going on in the world with all the occultism, and that there's a spiritual foundation to this. They're being very true to their game. You got to take your hat off to the occult folks, because they are working together. They believe in it. They're taking it seriously, and they are practicing what they preach in the dark. And we need to do exactly what they're doing, except doing it for the light, doing it for love. And we need to, for people that want to, follow the spiritual teachings of Christ. I mean, take the life of Christ back to formula and follow what he did. If you don't see Christ becoming a political activist and focusing on that, he had a short time to teach us. And I think that there's going to be certain applications, like I was saying before. We have to remove conflict from our life. We have to stop fighting each other. It's us against them, basically. We have to stop fighting each other. We have to start loving each other. We have to start trusting each other. Love thy neighbor. And it's really about defining what love is. What is love? And then we have to practice that, and we have to love each other. There was a time in my grandparents' time where they used to leave the door open. They'd go to bed, door would be open. Front door might even be wide open in the summer, and they'd just go to sleep. I mean, we have to get back to love, and then we have to see where that takes us. Each of us has our own gift locked inside of us. Each of us has something to bring to the table. Like some lady might be like, well, I started practicing love, and I found that I'm an expert with herbs now. And some guy might be like, well, I'm an expert with meditation. And I think that we need to come together. I don't think that we're working together. I think the truth movement is failing because it's being driven by egomaniacs as well. People are like, I want to make all the videos of this. I want all the glory. It's there's no synthesis of people coming together at all. It's all ego driven right now, and people are getting I think they're becoming narcissistic now in what they're doing. And that's why I don't use my picture. I don't want any fame off this. I don't want people coming up to me on the street and like, oh, you're such a wonderful man, because I'm really not. I'm a flawed man. Sometimes I act like Samuel Jackson in Pulp Fiction with my kids. I'm not a perfect dude, I'm not perfect at all.
No, it's been great. You're very knowledgeable. You're a good guy, I could tell, definitely, Michael. And I know there's a lot of people out there that would love to see your work and see more of what you do. Where do you want to direct them to?
Well, right now, I mean, I'm just on RevelationNow.net, and you can see my YouTube channel. I have a 3-minute prophecy news video channel that I just started, where I just cover some stories as pertains to prophecy. And that's really it. I mean, every now and then, right now I'm kind of in a position where I have to cover a lot of the occult stuff because now, you have the Grammys, you have the Super Bowl, then you have the BAFTA, the British Academy of Film and Television and Arts over in Britain, and then you have the Brit Awards. So, I have to look at this stuff and see what's going on with that and then report on that. But I also have to, like you said, we have to be able to provide solutions, and I think the best ones are going to be spiritual solutions because the occult is using spiritual solutions to trap us.
No, I agree, and it's great work that you're doing now over there. And do you feel that you have to step up now that you came out there and you've got a great following and you're going to continue serving that to the people out there?
I still feel like I'm kind of underground. I mean, I'm not really, I'm kind of, our sites are probably very similar in terms of hits and everything like that. It's just something, if I can affect one person, if one person can change another person and start a chain reaction like that, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, I'm up against a lot. Let's put it that way. I'm up against, obviously the occult, and I'm up against controlled opposition. People don't want me saying, turn Jesus away from politics. They want to talk about, Jesus and politics and talk about the end of the world and end time, fear time. They want to tell you about the end times all the time. And I just think that's a big mistake. I think that fear is a gateway to confusion and to division. So I try to stay away from that because Jesus wasn't walking around scared. He's like, they're going to kill me tomorrow. I can't eat at this Last Supper. I'm so upset about I'm going to die tomorrow. Die by torture, mind you. So he never really exhibited any type of fear because he understood what was at the end of God's rainbow. And I want to clarify God's rainbow, since the gay community has taken the rainbow for its own symbol. It's really God's rainbow. That was a sign that was given after the flood, that the Lord would never destroy the earth again with water. He's very slick when he said that. He said, I'll never destroy the earth again with water. Next time I'm going to use fire.
That's a great way to end this podcast, Michael. I really appreciate your time. You know a lot about the hidden stuff right in front of our face. Until next time, buddy, take care.
All right, I appreciate it, and good luck with your show. I'll be keeping my eye on you.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Okay, all right, bye.
All right, bye.
For a great mobile website by expert web designers, visit WeCreateWebDesigns.com. Get your website now for only $79 at WeCreateWebDesigns.com.